She went under the wheels.
How affected.
Welcome to Under the Wheels. I'm Matthew.
I'm Gabe.
And today we are turning back the clock to the fantastic year of 1960 when insurance salesmen got $90 a week, I guess. Right? That's what I got. If you
believe Billy Wilder, yes.
Insurance salesman got $90 a week and rent was only $80 a month, and therefore, when you carry the one and add a two, and good times in New York, I guess. We're gonna talk about Billy Wilder's classic, The Apartment.
Yeah, I mean it's considered like one of the best movies ever, according to like all those websites and people who like put old movies on a pedestal.
Did you know that before you laying all our cards on the table, Gabe, this was Gabe's recommendation for the week, since we're all inside and neither of us want to pay $20 to watch a movie that's quote in theaters unquote. Like I looked at the cost of...
You can either pay $10 and get coronavirus, or you can pay $20.
Well, no, all the theaters are closed.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, so you could either pay... I could have, like, if this were like a regular week, I probably could have, gone to the theater and been like, hey, we should talk about, I don't know, Invisible Man. But unfortunately, all the theaters are closed. And so they're like, oh, well, do you want to see this in your house? Pay $20 to have it for 48 straight hours. It's like, I don't know. It doesn't quite seem like I'm getting my money's worth at that point.
I know. We're so conditioned to think of like a new movie is $10. A movie in my house is worth like $2 at the most, if anything.
A movie in my house is worth whatever I'm paying for my streaming service to comp it for me.
I know. I can't remember who it was, but there was someone who was talking about how like the marketplace has kind of conditioned people to devalue movies as an art form as much as possible, to where it's like psychologically acceptable to pay $400 to see Hamilton, which you couldn't pay me to see that, or any musical really. Meanwhile,
no man, we gotta go see Les Mis when it goes into your area and when it finally tours in mine.
The idea of paying more than $10 to see a movie in theaters to a lot of people is ridiculous. And then streaming has like cheapened the art form even more, because now we're all in the mindset of like, well, if it's not freely available, or if it's not available for no extra charge on Netflix, Amazon Prime, Hulu, whatever, screw it.
It's not worth watching. Yeah.
It's not worth watching. And also now you have like all these people spreading around various pirate sites to watch movies at. Like, you go on any meme app and there's like, hey guys, here's a quick tip on how to watch movies for free, and they give you some like sketchy website.
It's like, hey, at least I got to watch, this shitty movie. I got to watch Showgirls for free. It doesn't matter that now my computer can't run for shit.
I know.
Like, Jesus Christ. I agree with you. Like, I'm interested. Yeah, if you can find that article, I'd love to read it, because I find, like, in addition to the fact that like studios have fought harder and harder and have gotten into this mode where it's like, oh, we can only put like really big budget, super like special effects heavy movies on the big screen, because that's the only way we can justify charging huge costs to make it worth it. So like now you only get like either super indie films that they spend, triple the budget marketing, instead of like, it's like Emma, for example, probably costs like, a couple, like maybe $10 million, and they probably spend like 20 to 30 million marketing it. And then you've got like these other like huge Marvel and Star Wars and DC movies, and the mid-budget movie has literally gone to just streaming services, which is the weirdest thing to me.
Yeah, but it's strange. And it's also like, I heard someone proposed like an idea where movie theaters would sell like season tickets, kind of the way that theaters do, where it's like you pay something like $60 and then or like $80 a year, and you get one ticket to every movie that comes through that theater, or something like that.
Yeah. They I think the model that I have for AMC, with the AMC, it's funny that we're talking about this, but the AMC A-list, the Stubbs A-list members, you pay $24, you get 3 movies a week. Well, if you see 3 movies a month, you've already paid it off. So like they can go up to $30. I'll still pay for it. And I'll still be able to see like anything that I really want to see, because you get 3 a week. So if you see 3 movies a week for 4 straight weeks, you've reduced the cost to $5.
Yeah.
But as far as like the difference between theater and like a movie, I feel like because of the amount of effort it takes to put on a theatrical production, it justifies the ticket cost. And I think the fact that, you just have a digital projector projecting on a large screen, the actual effort it takes to put in for, at least if I had to rationalize it, the actual effort it takes to put on a movie like is a lot less. Plus they can release it on Blu-ray and DVD or release it digitally, and that stuff doesn't cost them anything. Putting it on airlines doesn't cost them anything, and it spreads quickly. So I mean, I'm not an economist.
There's an idea in, I think it's Austrian economics that came up with this, the subjective theory of value, which is the idea that value doesn't exist. Things are only worth what you can convince someone to pay for it. So, so there's that take on it.
I would say everything in moderation. I believe that. I can believe that's true to a point. That would explain why electronics are so much more expensive than like dishes.
Yeah. So yeah, The Apartment, which is available with a Amazon Prime subscription for no extra charge.
Oh my god! I'm actually really excited to delve into this. So, but before we do, let's start off every episode like we always start off every episode, except apparently this one. Gabe, sir, what have you watched this week, or this last chunk of time?
Fortnight.
What have you been up to?
So this last couple weeks, I've watched. I watched a couple movies that you mentioned on previous episodes. I watched Zhang Yimou's Shadow, or Zhang Yimou, as you like to say.
Yeah, Zhang Yimou.
It's interesting. It's like a lot of the action sequences and like the cool set piece in the middle where they attack the city are like really cool. The look of the movie is pretty interesting. Like you were saying, everything's ultra desaturated to being almost black and white, except for people's like faces and some blood and stuff. But it feels like that whole movie spent its entire budget on the main like set piece in the middle, and the rest is some like one room theater piece. Also, there's a lot of that like ultra stylized like kabuki theater Toshiro Mifune acting going on. Which is a little off-putting. Especially when it's like a dramatic scene and everyone's like making these crazy like wide-eyed faces and these ultra like stuttery movements and stuff.
Yeah, the acting wasn't the best.
No.
I think it's safe to say.
But I think that's just a thing. Like, for whatever reason, a lot of the big Japanese directors in the 50s and 60s who made a lot of those period pieces with ultra stylized acting, I think that eventually became shorthand for just this is how you act in a period piece movie. It's kind of like how we now think that everyone, like in our minds, even though we know it's not true, we imagine everyone in the 1940s and 50s talking like some kind of radio announcer, Right. So I think it's... Or like everyone talks like it's His Girl Friday. And so I think it's that kind of weird cultural shorthand that's so just ingrained into the language of that type of movie that it's kind of taken for granted now that, oh, it's a period piece in China or Japan or East Asia generally. Everyone has to act like Toshiro Mifune now. So yeah, it was pretty good. I watched Haywire as well, which I really liked. I think it's kind of like a poor man's version of The Limey.
Yeah, I could see that.
It's like it's short, it's to the point, it's really stylish in a lot of places and looks extremely cheap in a lot of other places.
Right.
Which is, I think, par for the course. Whenever Soderbergh doesn't have a big budget, he'll make his movies look really good, except for a few scenes where it looks like they were shot on like digital videotape in terrible lighting. Like the raid at the house where everything's blue is shorthand for nighttime. It's like, dude, this is like a film school 101. Like, don't do that.
He just puts a giant blue filter on it in post, and is like, yeah, it's fine. It's fine. People will get it.
I love it when the lights go off and then Bill Paxton's face is just like, the lighting is exactly the same, but it's blue now.
It's like blue with like a little highlight of like the flame of orange on it. It's like some guy had to go in every scene and just draw a little mask on it to make
It's
sure
funny
that
because
the
like
yellow showed up.
they do that in Mad Max Fury Road and it looks amazing, but they do that in Haywire and it looks terrible.
Well, the difference is Mad Max Fury Road took like 2 years to edit and like get all the post stuff looking good, and Haywire probably did it in like a weekend.
I know.
Let's be honest.
Knowing Soderbergh, he did it in a weekend.
Like that's part of what I love about his movies. Like only he would have an extended sequence where like they're driving in the car and it's just like the cameraman in the back seat recording them as they're like driving forward and going in reverse. It's like things like that where it's like, all right, Soderbergh, I gotcha.
Yeah, I really appreciated all the extended, like the really long fight scenes that this movie is just full of. Mm-hmm. And that they're very like, you know, they brutal. Try to be as realistic as possible. You can definitely tell, like they kind of went to Gina Carano. It's like, okay, all your cage fighting shit, just do that, and we'll kind of figure out a way to work with it.
Yeah, well, and it was cool because like, you know, they applied it to areas where it's like she's in narrow corridors. Oh, she can do her cool like kick off the wall punch you thing, you know?
Yeah. So yeah, I thought all that stuff was really neat. I mean, you know, it's plot and character wise, it's whatever. But like, I think everything else about it is pretty neat.
Especially all the cameos, the Soderberghian cameos.
Oh yeah.
We were talking about in Suicide Squad. We were talking about how like Ewan McGregor and his like weird roles, and it's like, yeah, Ewan McGregor is in this movie. Why is Ewan McGregor in this movie? I don't know, but it's fun to see him in there. It's like with his like horrible American accent rearing its ugly head.
I know. It's weird because like we're so used to him with a British accent, even though he has a Scottish accent. Yeah. And then he seemed, and like lately, the last 10 years, he's been in all these movies with a terrible American accent.
At least they didn't have to like force Michael Fassbender to have an American accent. I think he had a British accent and then an Irish accent at one time too.
Yeah, I think his character's real accent is Irish, and then he pretends to be British to like lure Gina Carano.
It's like, ooh, sexy British Michael Fassbender accent.
Again, he basically plays James Bond in this movie, so it's like, why doesn't... We're kind of going back to our earlier conversation about that. But yeah,
why don't they just get Fassbender for James Bond?
Yeah. But yeah, Haywire is an interesting movie. I also saw Warrior. Speaking of MMA movies, another MMA movie.
Warrior's so awesome.
Oh, it's so good. Holy shit. Dude, Tom Hardy is the greatest actor of a generation. Anyone who disagrees with that sentiment is just wrong. Like, his performance is amazing. Now you have to watch
Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy.
I've already seen it. I saw it in theaters.
Oh, okay. I want to rewatch it. I forgot Tom Hardy was in it. I was like,
yeah, Tom Hardy's freaking amazing in Warrior, and Joel Edgerton does a great job, and Nick Nolte does a great job. Like, it's such a cheesy sports movie, but it manages to be like super grounded, and all of the emotional beats that would be pretty eye roll worthy in a lesser movie are like amazing in this. Like, especially Tom Hardy's big fight with Joel Edgerton, where like, you know, Joel snaps his shoulder, and then he's just like losing his mind. He's like an animal running around the cage, like trying to murder him with his one arm. And then like at the end when they finally reconcile, it's like it's such a triumphant moment when so many movies have the exact same beats and you're just kind of like, whatever.
Right.
But yeah, Warrior takes the generic sports movie plot and somehow makes it like this transcendent thing. Like, you know exactly what's going to happen, but somehow it's amazing and you buy into it 110%.
Yeah. Well, it's directed by the guy who directed that Ben Affleck basketball movie that
I know. It's crazy. He's going back to his roots and directing a movie about Ben Affleck playing himself as a fat alcoholic wash up.
Oh But yeah,
it's crazy, man. Like, watching ESPN for the past month has been an exercise in frustration. Because every like I'll stream stuff on ESPN instead of because I don't have like cable or like actual TV. Mm-hmm. So the streaming commercials are different from the live TV commercials, obviously. The streaming commercials, every single break, there's a 30-second spot for the way back. And I want to kill myself.
That's what it's called.
It's so bad. I'm like every fucking break, you just get Ben Affleck saying, it's like, they haven't been through what we've been through. They don't know what it's like to get knocked down and have to get back up. And I'm like, ugh.
That's because that's Ben Affleck's way back to Oscar glory.
I know.
It's not, but that was what he was hoping for.
This is like, it's weird because Ben Affleck is also like a writer and director of movies as well. So it would make sense if he wrote and directed The Way Back, and this was like his Chef, like the way Chef was for Jon Favreau.
Right. Well, I think it'd be too on the nose. If it were like a dramatic movie for Ben Affleck, it'd be a little too on the nose.
Dude, Chef was so freaking on the nose.
It was, but at least it was a comedy.
Yeah, that's true. Like Chef was ultra on the nose about Jon Favreau's life and career, and like this movie is ultra on the nose about Ben Affleck's life and career.
Yeah, but at least with the Chef, it's like art. It's not like the art of coaching as like like this is Hardball but with basketball, like the Keanu Reeves movie Hardball.
It's too weird. Anyway, Warrior, amazing movie. Everyone should watch it because it's awesome. It's also like, if you're an MMA fan, there's like a good number of cameos in there that you can be like, hey, I know who that is.
Yeah, I actually thought Frank Grillo was an MMA fighter when I first saw it. I was like, oh yeah, he must be a coach. And then I'm like, oh wait, no, he's an actor.
Yeah, he's just an actor. I mean,
he's a good actor.
Yeah, it's weird because like, well, there's two things. So Frank Grillo plays a guy named Frank. Tom Hardy plays a guy named Tom. Frank Grillo, who I'm kind of used to seeing as like this giant, like Punisher and Crossbones and things like that, is like thin as a rail in Warrior. And he's kind of like this like hippy dippy martial arts coach where he's playing like classical music and he does all this kind of weird stuff. He's really convincing as his character. He kind of just, you really believe he's that guy.
Yeah. I thought they to the point I thought that they legit got like a coach, and they did that naturalized actor 1970s type thing. They just like got the guy. It's like, oh, you're a coach? Okay, cool. You can be the coach in here. Can we give you a couple of lines to say too? And he's like, oh, sure, yeah. But
one fun note is Anthony Rumble Johnson plays one of the fighters in the movie. Who, like, he's the black guy that Joel Edgerton has to fight first. And the way their fight goes is he catches Joel Edgerton in a bad position, like unloads all these power shots on him, but can't knock him out, and then gets submitted in the second round. And that's the story of the actual Anthony Johnson's entire career. If he doesn't knock you out in the first round, he gets discouraged and then usually gets submitted later.
Talk about on-the-nose real-life scenarios.
So, yeah, when I saw that, it's like, wow, they just have Anthony Johnson playing basically himself. So I thought that was funny.
Dude, fun fact, Nick Nolte was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor for that movie.
I know. I can see why, because his performance is very, like, Oscar baity. I mean, it's good, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But it's got like, the Oscar checkbox scenes, Like when he's really drunk in the hotel room, like screaming at his audiobook of Moby Dick, which is so pretentious. But
I've corrected that. Can we who is the
Gavin
director
O'Connor?
Hold on.
It was Gavin O'Connor.
Gavin O'Connor. Gavin on the nose O'Connor. Mm-hmm. What else did he do?
It's crazy that he got nominated and Tom Hardy didn't, though, which I think just furthers my thesis that the world does not appreciate Tom Hardy as much as it should.
He's like the Toshiro Mifune of the modern day, but without like all of the credit that Toshiro Mifune gets. Then again, Toshiro Mifune was in like a shit ton of movies from like between like Drunken Angel and when he was forced to go into television. Like he was in everything, it seemed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a shame Tom Hardy does not have like 3 Academy Awards at this point.
I know. But it's not about how many Academy Awards you have. It's all about like how you're remembered. I mean, Sidney Lumet nominated a ton of times. One of the greatest directors, in my opinion. Never won. So
I think a lot of people don't know who Sidney Lumet is, unfortunately.
I know. It's kind of a shame, but like if you do any sort of delving, like if you're a film major or film person at all, there's like 3 movies of his that all I have to say is 12 Angry Men, and people are like, oh yeah, that thing that everyone spins off.
This is amazing, but no one knows who made it or who was in it or who was involved with it.
Although, which is a shame because like that reminds me of something else about Seven Samurai, but it's a shame because like a lot of people have preconceived notions about 12 Angry Men, but like from a technical standpoint, it's a very show-offy film. It's really good, but like for something that was, it's a good version of a movie that was adapted from a play into a movie script and like uses the film language effectively to show progression in it. So
yeah, well, it's like Sidney Lumet's kind of like a more recent version of Billy Wilder in the sense that like, AFI and Turner Classic Movies, if you ask them, Billy Wilder is like top 5 greatest filmmakers, writer-directors of all time. Like an absolute master of the art form. Meanwhile, I don't think Netflix has ever had one of his movies on their platform. I don't think most people know who he is, just because like there's that recency bias of like, well, he was like the Quentin Tarantino or whatever of the 1950s. Yeah. But we're not in 1950 anymore, so no one gives a shit. And also, there's a lot of people where if you show them a movie that's in black and white, they just won't watch it.
I'm excited to get into that because I agree. I agree with everything you just said there.
Well, it's like, people will refuse to play 64-bit video games because the graphics don't look as good or whatever, It's like, well, this doesn't have color. Movies should have colored now. Or like
why isn't there HD bump mapping on this game? What the hell?
Yeah, it's it's like people who like it's a weird thing where it's like, oh, this movie's in black and white. Nah, it's too old. Oh, this movie's got subtitles. Nah, I'm illiterate.
I don't like reading my movies. Which I totally get it. Like, don't get me wrong, I totally get it. But if you can, especially nowadays, if you can adapt yourself to black and white movies, if you can adapt yourself to black and white movies. In some ways, they're so much more visually enriching than colored films. Yeah. Color movies.
Which we'll get into with The Apartment, because that movie looks amazing.
Yes, we'll definitely get into it.
And then the last movie I saw recently was Frank and Lola, which is, it's a thriller I heard about like a long time ago that I thought got more acclaim than it actually did. But it's really good. It's got Michael Shannon playing like a jealous boyfriend full of murderous rage who's also a chef. Which, if that doesn't sell you on the movie, I don't think anything will. Like, the movie's really stylish. It's really well written. It's less than 90 minutes, so it's like airtight. It's got Michael Nyqvist in it, who's the bad guy from John Wick and Mission Impossible Ghost Protocol. But yeah, Michael Shannon...
Rest in peace.
Rest in peace. Michael Shannon delivers like one of the all-time great Michael Shannon performances. Like, he is just seething with anger in like every scene, and it's great. Like, I would say Gimme Shelter is like the #1 Michael Shannon performance of all time, and then this is like maybe 2 or 3. So yeah, it's a really great, like, kind of serious adult thriller.
Huh. Where did you see it on?
Netflix.
I'll have to bookmark that one. Again, Imogen Poots. I have a love-hate with her. I think we talked about this before with Green Book.
Is it Gimme Shelter or Take Shelter? That's the...
I believe it's Take Shelter. That weird, awkward...
Oh, yeah, Take Shelter.
Take Shelter.
Yeah, Take Shelter, written and directed by Jeff Nichols. That is the #1 Michael Shannon performance of all time. But
okay,
Frank and Lola is like up there with that.
You mean the number one performance of Michael Shannon isn't in The Night Before or 8 Mile?
Correct. And it's definitely not in Bad Boys 2.
Oh shit, that's right. I was so happy to see him in that. I was like, what the fuck is going on here? As like the worst white supremacist of all time. Oh man. You know, Michael Shannon, like, you know, I made fun of him for being in The Night Before, but like, I think it's called The Night Before, the Seth Rogen movie where he's a drug dealer. Michael Shannon can do anything. He's good in comedy. He's funny.
He is. He can do anything, but there is one thing that he does better than anything else.
Maybe. He was really good in The Current War. Like, because he did the one thing that I never really see him as, and that's like a completely sympathetic guy.
Yeah.
And he was really good in that. He was really good playing that. He could do anything.
Is that really any better than him as General Zod screaming, "I will find him"? Like, that's peak Michael Shannon. Like, that's why we love him.
I will find him!
I mean, it is. Well, I don't know. Like, I'll take him as, like, sympathetic. I'll take him at anything, pretty much, at this point. Like, you know, I thought, I wish, I think even Rian Johnson wished he could have put more Michael Shannon in Knives Out. Like, Michael Shannon's going to be the next Star Wars cameo character. We're going to be like, oh, It's Michael Shannon as a stormtrooper, but he's not going to say anything because he's going to look intimidatingly, and it's just going to be a wasted cameo by insert popular director here. So.
Oh, man, if it was me and they said, hey, Michael Shannon has to have a cameo in this Star Wars movie, he would be like the one screaming stormtrooper.
Dude, I'd put him as the bad guy in a Star Wars movie, like without a doubt. And I'd just be like, you know what? We're gonna make the majority of the movie Michael Shannon as the bad guy in this Star Wars movie.
Yeah, I will say he tends to play pretty sympathetic characters for the most part in like Jeff Nichols movies.
I guess that's true. Yeah,
because he's sympathetic in Mud. He's sympathetic in.
He was in Mud.
Take Shelter.
Was he
yeah,
he was the dad.
Dude, he's the kid's dad in Mud.
Yeah. I'd watch Take Shelter. I like Jessica Chastain. She's awesome.
Yeah.
Especially as a Southern Belle idiot. Oh shit.
So yeah, what have you been watching lately?
I've been watching a lot, but I'll keep it to 4. First, what is your opinion on Kevin Smith movies?
I really like Clerks, and that's my opinion.
I would call myself a fan. I've watched, I think, almost every movie he's done except for Cop Out. There's only so far I'll go. But I did watch. Like, it's interesting to see his directing style go forward, because I think as he's gone, he's become a better director of actors, and he's used more interesting shot compositions. Like, as he's gone. Unfortunately, some of his movies, not particularly amazing, but I appreciate his spirit. With that said, Jay and Silent Bob Reboot is on Amazon Prime, and I've been meaning to watch it, so I figured I'd watch it for free, like a true asshole fan. If you liked Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, you'll like Jay and Silent Bob Reboot. It has kind of like a meta opening, where it's like, oh, this movie is going to be 100% exactly a reboot of the movie we saw in Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back, and it's going to be self-aware. But then like, the end of the first act, I would say, it kind of takes a turn where it still does a lot of the stuff in spirit. Like, it still kind of hits some of the points that Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back hit, but it adds a whole nother layer of, like, character development for Jay's character, because he has to feel like he has to come to terms with his own... You're not going to watch it, are you?
No.
Okay. He has to come to terms with his own abandonment from his parents, as well as the fact that he's abandoned his daughter. And so that's kind of what drives the heart of the movie, which, you know, if you're going to have a movie that's all about cameos, it's good to have some sort of a heart in there. So that part's good. It's funny because Val Kilmer makes a cameo, but he doesn't say anything because, you know, Val Kilmer's tongue's all fucked up.
Yeah.
So he can't say anything anyway. But he has a cameo in it in kind of like a ridiculous way. If you like cameo fests in movies, you'll like it. But if you think that stuff is like so 2000, early 2000s, early 90s, then you can stay away. Although Ben Affleck has a really good extended period in the movie that was nice. And it actually looks surprisingly good. Like I said, I feel like over the years he's gotten better with actors and he's gotten better with camera work. So, and then I watched 2 animated films. I watched Oliver and Company. Have you ever seen that one?
When I was a little kid, yeah.
Yeah. So I won't talk much about it. I think it's an interesting movie because it's very much like a movie of its time. All of the backgrounds look like photographs that they then ran through a copy machine. So like the photographs look kind of realistic, but kind of hokey. I know nothing about Oliver Twist, I realized. I know, may I have some more, please? But that's it. Like, I don't know anything about the story. So I went in completely blind. I was like, I don't know what the hell's going on in this movie. The only thing that's really amazing about this movie is that it has some of the most violent death scenes I've ever seen in a G-rated movie.
Really?
There are these 2 dogs that are chasing the main characters at the end of the movie, and they get knocked off. They're on the subway. They get knocked off the subway, hit the rails, and get electrocuted so hard that they literally disappear.
What?
And this is a Disney movie. So that happens twice. Okay. And then the final bad guy, he's chasing our main characters on the subway tracks. And our main characters are on like a little moped. They somehow get up onto like a piece of the Brooklyn Bridge, I think it is. And they're zipping away. The bad guy's like, what the heck? And then he looks forward. He sees a train coming. You see the car go off screen. And then the train coming the other way on screen with a giant explosion following it. I was like, wait a second. Is this a Disney movie? So those are the 2 things I took away from Oliver and Company. I was like, these are the most violent deaths I've ever seen in a Disney movie. And it got a G rating. And then going back to your childhood some more. Did you ever watch the Disney Hunchback of Notre Dame?
Again, like ages ago.
Yeah, right. You and musicals. I love that movie. I understand that a lot of people have problems with it tonally because it goes from like, oh, look at how happy Quasimodo is. Isn't this great? Oh, now everyone's throwing fruit at him. Now all of a sudden ropes have come out and they're strangling him and like throwing fruit and everyone's like looking on like super disturbed and Frollo's there and he's like, let the cretin burn. And like, this is in the first 15 minutes of the movie. Like, what? What the hell happened?
Oh, because like the book it's based on is ultra like dark and depressing.
It is like the book where all the characters die. Yeah. There's, if you're really interested in the history of the evolution of the Hunchback of Notre Dame story, there is a great video I can link to, which I'll put in the show notes. But the Disney movie itself, like, the singing is so good. And Kevin Kline is in it, and he's really entertaining, always. And the movie is so dark that I love it so much. It's like, if you're a fan of animated films, it's so worth another watch. Also, it's funny to look at the background because you can see like the early use of CG. So like the front looks so good because they're all hand drawn and colored really well with the cap system. And then in the background, you see these like really janky looking 3D guys like moving around. And it's like, oh, that took me out of the movie. So if you want to stay in the movie, don't look at them. If you don't care, just pull back. And look at those 3D guys.
Well, it's kind of like all those movies from the like mid 90s time period where they just started introducing CGI animation and they were mixing it with traditional animation. That gave birth to some really strange stuff. Like, remember the all CGI opening to Mask of the Phantasm?
Yes.
That's just like incredibly ugly, and then it gets back to the actual movie and you're like, oh, thank goodness.
I know. Well, and luckily, like, the rest of the animation and like the animation house they used was good in that. But yeah, that like firmly plants you in a time period. You're like, oh god, what the hell is this? Like,
I know.
I do remember like in that time they were also trying to make the 3D models kind of look like hand animation, so they all had kind of like a pastel-y scratchiness to them.
Yeah.
It's like, oh god.
Another.
And then, like,
oh,
go ahead.
Shit. I was gonna say, like, another instance that just came to mind of a similarly awful CGI opening was, you know, a while back I rewatched Guillermo del Toro's Hellboy, And the credit sequence for that, the opening title sequence, is all CGI, and it has like CGI newspapers blowing around and stuff. Oh, no. And it is aged so poorly. Oh my goodness.
I haven't watched Fight Club for a while just because I don't care about Fight Club anymore. But that sequence where like they have the CG flyby through the room where like he accidentally left his stove on and it like caused like a gas leak and like his apartment exploded. Like I feel like that also hasn't aged particularly amazingly. Like it looks CG. Like you're not trying to fool anyone with like the realism of it.
Oh, totally. And it's weird too because like in the case of Hellboy, a lot of the effects from that movie hold up really well because it's all practical.
Right.
But it's just that freaking CGI opening where you're like, oh, and then CGI Hellboy when he's like a baby. It's also really bad. Like Professor Broom hands him a candy bar, like a very obvious sponsorship candy bar.
From Baby Ruth or something.
Baby Ruth, yeah. And then it's just like awful 2004 CGI. Baby Hellboy takes the candy bar and you're like, oh no.
Like it's amazing. I think we've talked about it before, but it's amazing. Like before Gollum and after Gollum, like they've somehow figured out how to make realistic looking skin texture in the Two Towers, and that changed everything. Like you could tell all the movies that came before. It changed
everything for people who could afford it.
Yeah. All they had to do was scan the bottom of Peter Jackson's feet. Oh, that's actually like the fact how they got Gollum to look as good as he did with like the skin texture is incredible because they actually brought in a makeup artist to learn how to paint digitally and teach the guys how to do makeup. Like it's so cool.
And you watch those movies and they still look good. Gollum still looks good.
They do for the most part.
For the most part.
They have a cave troll.
Yeah.
That part.
At least the orcs are people with makeup and not CGI orcs like in The Hobbit.
Yeah. And again, I don't hate the CGI orcs. Like, granted, it's not Azog the Defiler. His character model is just kind of bland looking in general. It's like, really, you wanted to go with this guy? But like, I don't hate the CGI orcs as much as a lot of people, but I can understand why people don't like them.
Yeah.
When we talk about tone problems, that's Hobbit.
Tone problems in The Hobbit are one of many or as one subset of the entire like laundry list of problems that those movies have. But I mean, part of it is the movies feel like an animated movie because there is so much CGI, and yet it is like also trying to be very dark and serious and linked to Lord of the Rings, which is tonally very different from The Hobbit. Right. That's Billy Connolly's problem, like CGI head just pasted on a like an Unreal Engine CG character model.
with his weird facial features like scrunching and squirming, all like looks like a Pixar character. And you're like,
I know it looks it looks like his face is floating on top of a video game character. Like really you remember like PlayStation 2 era sports games where like you could create a character and you could have the PlayStation Eye camera take a picture of your face and like paste it onto the character, and it always looked like some awful like horror movie monster. That's what Billy Connolly looks like in The Hobbit: Battle of the Five Armies.
He looks like a high-res version of it, but not like high-res in the fact of like it looks better, but high-res in the fact of like they were able to take a picture at like 1020 or 1080p and just like paste it on there. So like when he turns to the side, it still looks like a fake face.
Exactly. It's like instead of being a 480i abomination, it's a 4K abomination.
It's a character from Beowulf brought to life. Oh man, but yeah, Hunchback of Notre Dame. It's good. I highly recommend going back and seeing it if it's been a while. I think the catharsis at the end is very well deserved. And then the last movie I saw that I would talk about is Casablanca. I rewatched that. Yeah. Have you seen Casablanca?
Yeah.
Okay. I was going to say it might be...
It's a weird experience watching it now because it just feels it's kind of like Jaws in the sense of like it just feels like so many lines from that movie have made their way into pop culture broadly. It just sounds like someone is spamming, like the screenwriter is just spamming like cliches for every line of dialogue, even though like that movie came up with those lines of dialogue. Except the one that always perplexed me about Casablanca is "Here's looking at you, kid." Like I still don't know what that means.
Basically, in the movie, Humphrey Bogart is like 65. Not really. He's like 45. And Ingrid Bergman is like 23. And even in the movie, she plays a young character. So I'm guessing that's what it alludes to. Like, she's young, he's older, and like it's just their thing. It's like, here's looking at you, kid. Now, with that said, I agree with you. I'm not sure why they keep repeating it. It seems really forced, but I still enjoy it. Like, in that way that only 1950s catchphrases can feel forced.
Yeah.
You know, like, it's funny because Casablanca has almost the exact same cast as the Maltese Falcon.
Yep.
So you have, you've got Dead Man coming in, and he's like, "Oh, Rick, I have something for you," and you know,
you despise me, don't you, Rick?
It's like like, why would he even say that? Like I love it when those lines come out of nowhere. Like they do that in Lockout too. He's like, "You don't like me, Snow, do you?" And it's like, who cares? Why would you say that?
We have to establish the relationships between the characters, Matt.
Yeah, it's
screenwriting 101, Sid Field.
It's not enough that like Humphrey Bogart looks physically ill every time he tries to touch what's his name? Like, we have to explicitly state it for like the person in the back of the audience.
Are you sure that's not just Humphrey Bogart looking physically ill as he always does?
I honestly, like, there were like 3 movies in a row that turned me from I don't understand why people like Humphrey Bogart to, oh yeah, I like Humphrey Bogart. It was Sabrina, I think that's what it's called, with Audrey Hepburn, the Maltese Falcon, and this one, especially Casablanca.
Right. So I like Casablanca. I hate the Maltese Falcon. I think that movie's awful and interminably boring.
I never said I liked the Maltese Falcon. I said that
it convinced you that you liked Humphrey Bogart.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I don't. It was mainly Sabrina that convinced me that I liked him.
I've always been kind of lukewarm on Bogart until I saw The Big Sleep, and I'm like, okay, I like Humphrey Bogart
now you get him. It's really weird watching him in The African Queen. Like, that's just a weird movie in general. I think that's a movie that's very much of its time. Like, I don't think anyone would make a movie like similar to that. Because
I always get The African Queen confused with Priscilla, Queen of the Desert.
The African Queen is just like Humphrey Bogart trying to woo Hugo Weaving in drag. Well, it's weird because like you have Hugo Weaving in drag in Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, right? Mm-hmm. And then you have Katharine Hepburn as the main love interest.
And Guy Pearce in drag.
Who?
Guy Pearce. Oh, I think he's in drag as well.
I've never seen it, but I've heard of it. Is it worth a watch? Is it better than The African Queen?
I don't know. I haven't seen it. I just know that there's this movie, Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, that's about Hugo Weaving and Guy Pearce playing drag queens. Oh, and Terrence Stamp as well.
Is he a drag queen too?
It says he's a trans woman.
Really?
Yeah.
This might have to make it onto our Under the Wheels list of movies to watch. Dude, I feel like Hugo Weaving is one of those actors who was like always down for anything. Mm-hmm. You know, like he's like, "You want me to play a drag queen? That's fine." Or like, I don't know, like anything. Like it's so weird watching him in Hacksaw Ridge because he's like, "I'm an alcoholic, racist American soldier person who's super Catholic." Like,
and
what?
Has a terrible
Really?
American accent.
Yes, which is weird because Agent Smith's American accent was bad, but like not that bad.
It kind of worked because he's a robot.
Yeah,
or a computer program.
Computer program. Like slipped every now and then into Australian, but for the most part was that over enunciated American that we hadn't gotten driven used to by House yet.
Yeah.
But yeah, Casablanca, like I like to go back and rewatch it every now and then. I'll say this about it. It's much better watch. Like I think it feels kind of slow when you're watching it via home video. Mm-hmm. But I went and I saw it in theaters and it moved like there was no tomorrow. Like it was so fast. Like it felt like at a really good pace when I was watching it live, because the first day where like you're introduced to all the characters takes up like a third of the movie's runtime, and then the rest of it is kind of like speeds up from there. But it's also weird because Casablanca has that sort of like tortured, like the previously super happy but now tortured character that Humphrey Bogart plays in that. And like at this point now it's like a bad cliche, so it's kind of weird watching it there. I don't know how common that was back in the day, but like it felt kind of fresh.
Sure. It seems like all the bad cliches in film history were invented by Casablanca, and then they became bad cliches when everyone's like, hey, let's rip off Casablanca.
Hey, you know what my favorite movie is? Casablanca. Let's put a Casablanca reference in. Like,
of all the gin joints and all the slums and all the cities of all the countries of all the planets in the galaxy, she had to come walking into mine.
Season 2 of The Mandalorian.
Pretty much.
Anyway, that's what I'd been watching. Okay, so The Apartment. I'm gonna start this way. I'm gonna change up the format.
Okay.
Why did you recommend it for us to watch?
Because I'd never seen it before. It's considered one of the best movies ever by, those classic movie sources such as the American Film Institute and Turner Classic and all these other people who are like, oh my God, it's so good. And because we were struggling to come up with something to talk about, so I was like, I was just sifting through what was on streaming. It's like, what's something I haven't seen already that's supposed to be really good? And then I came across this, and it's like, oh, this is the only movie that's like freely available that was made before like 1970. Fuck it, let's give it a shot. And I don't think I've ever really seen a Billy Wilder movie before.
Really?
Yeah, which is weird because I actually found out that Sunset Boulevard's also on Prime.
Is it?
Yeah. So we were very close to doing a double feature, but yeah, it was like, hey, what the hell? It was either that or a Bad Taste, which we will probably end up throwing under the wheels anyway.
Yeah, I think probably. more likely than not, as we clearly have a fascination with Peter Jackson movies.
Yes. And low-budget schlock movies as well.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, so I was like, hey, why not? Why not watch The Apartment?
Now, having seen... So, what other... Is this the only Billy Wilder movie you've seen? Because I can roll off a couple that I've seen.
I think this is the only one that I've seen. Let me...
Some Like It Hot?
Nope.
The 7-Year Itch?
Nope. I've seen bits and pieces of Double Indemnity, and I think that's it.
That was the one I was gonna, which is kind of like the outlier. It feels I was gonna say Double Indemnity.
Yeah, it's interesting because speaking of movies that invent a lot of tropes that are then ripped off until the end of time, Double Indemnity seemed to have like created all the film noir tropes.
Yeah, anything that wasn't created by the Maltese Falcon was like solidified by. The Big Sleep and Double Indemnity. Well, especially Go ahead.
I was just going to say, which is interesting, because like a lot of, especially like film noir cinematography is typically like credited to Double Indemnity.
Really?
But yeah. But it's weird because like a lot of what I've seen of that movie is like just butt ugly. Like it's like you think of film noir as having this very stylish, German expressionist photography going on, like The Third Man or something. But all the bits I've seen of Double Indemnity, everything looks really muddy and terrible. And
it's not the high contrast black and white. It's like the sort of like muddy, like out of focus faces, like the soft focus faces, and
it's weird. Radiance. And you contrast that with The Apartment. That like The Apartment is gorgeous. Like every shot of that movie is perfectly lit with like capturing like the full dynamic range of light and shadow. Like it's so pretty.
The Apartment's The Apartment's kind of a strange movie because, well, it's not kind of strange, but The Apartment's a nice movie because it feels like a master of his craft working on the highest level possible. Mm-hmm. So, like, for just to kind of clear the air, I actually own Double Indemnity. I like it a lot because of something that I like a lot in The Apartment and all of the Billy Wilder movies I've seen, which is his character work. I've seen about half of Some Like It Hot, and I've seen all of The 7-Year Itch.
Okay.
So there's my pedigree of Billy Wilder.
It's
now
weird.
with
One thing about Billy Wilder is he looks a lot like Wallace Shawn, and I just I feel like that needs to be pointed out.
My movie didn't do well. Inconceivable.
Inconceivable. Yeah. I always thought that was so funny. He looks a lot like Wallace Shawn, but no one ever mentions that or brings that up. He's also he's also Austrian.
That I'm not surprised at, because I'm guessing he came over because Double Indemnity came out in 1945, I think.
He came over in the 30s because of Nazis, because he's Jewish and German at the same time.
The nice double whammy.
Oh yeah, it's definite double whammy.
So what did you? So you went in with the knowledge that a lot of these, that this movie's on a lot of those lists of like greatest movie ever made. Mm-hmm. I went in knowing nothing about the movie.
Huh.
Yeah, I didn't do any research into it until after we had already watched it, because I was like, oh, is this one of his like higher tier movies? Like I kind of knew, I kind of know what I'm in for with Billy Wilder, which is nice. But it wasn't until afterwards that I was like, most people consider this the greatest movie ever made. It's like, ooh, why haven't I heard anyone else say that? So, with that
you clearly don't watch enough of Robert Osborne, I guess.
Or who's the guy who replaced him?
I don't know.
Oh man, what's his name? He looks super awkward every time they're like with special notes from this guy, and he's got like too much hair, and he looks kind of like Mel Kiper Jr.
Oh, I know exactly. Yeah, he does look a lot like Mel Kiper Jr. Actually. Right. He doesn't have like anywhere near the gravitas that Osborne does either.
No, but I find him entertaining enough for being on like clearly on a set with like all of the noise turned all the way down, so you can't hear any white noise, and he's just like, it was funny to think that in that movie Billy Wilder was actually on the out and outs with the studio, but a resurgence like this made it one of the top
Ben
pens.
Mankiewicz.
Ben Mankiewicz, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, they always have that like awkward with special notes from Ben Mankiewicz, and he's like looking down and turns to face the camera like some like 1930s movie or something like that, some Playbill introduction. Well,
because they do like the old school. I think they kind of ripped off like the PBS, like Alistair Cook style Masterpiece Theater introductions, where he would be like reading a book, and then he'd be like, "Oh, hello," and then put it aside, and it's like, on today's episode of The Jewel in the Crown, blah 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 blah. But blah 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 blah, and then it'll like go to the episode of whatever like awful British soap opera is being peddled to American consumers who think they're smarter than they are.
Another episode of Rosemary and Thyme.
Yeah, or it's like on the last installment of the Forsyte saga, you know. Dude, Masterpiece Theater always pushes out like such dreck, and I don't understand why people like it so much. Because it's like it's always like these really boring melodramatic British soap operas based on like works of classic English literature by stuffy authors like, you know, E.M. Forster and G.K. Chesterton and a lot of other people who don't have anything interesting to say. But I think just by sheer
it brought us Tom Hardy in Wuthering Heights,
and they're so tacky. But I think by sheer virtue of their Britishness and the fact that they're on PBS with the name Masterpiece, like Americans are just like, oh, I really love this Downton Abbey. It's so fancy.
I actually really like Downton Abbey.
I hate Downton Abbey.
I watched the entire series. Now, it's weird. Well, I won't drag on about Downton Abbey and how I appreciated it, and it made me want to go back and watch Gosford Park, which I couldn't sit through.
That's such like an awful British soap opera name, Gosford Park.
It was directed by Robert Altman. I was like, oh, well, it was written by Julian Fellows, who can clearly write, and directed by Robert Altman, who can clearly direct. No, unfortunately, the worst part about Julian Fellows' writing is his plotting, and a movie's all about having a good plot. And Gosford Park took about an hour to get the setup done. I was like, no, I'm falling asleep, man.
Yeah.
Oh.
My mom loved this one called The Jewel in the Crown, which was mostly noteworthy for being the piece of media that introduced the world to Charles Dance. Because he plays like the suave love interest of the main character in that.
Like for the only time.
For the only time. And this is like back in I want to say in the 80s. And I caught it on some sort of like, it was being brought back for some revival or whatever. Yeah, 1984. And holy hell, it is so like corny. Everything you expect from an over-the-top British soap opera based on a work of classic English literature and then fed to people through PBS. It delivers on all of those tropes.
I love all of that shit. I don't watch it very often though, so I guess I don't love it that much. Like, oh yeah, I'll watch it. Yeah, I'm excited to watch the next season of Poldark. Like, are you really, Matt? Are you sure? Like, I don't know, maybe. So shows you how much I watch PBS. How did we get talking about PBS? Oh, Turner Classic Movies.
Turner Classic Movies.
With the dip from black as you just see like Ben Mankiewicz's face as he's waiting to say his first line. You know, like just behind the camera, like the director's like, all right, and go. He's like trying to remember.
Yeah, so like, I mean, like this is the type of movie they would have on Turner Classic Movies and make a big deal about it. And
yes,
Ben Mankiewicz doing his best Robert Osborne impression would be like, you know, this is like one of the greatest movies ever made. Billy Wilder at top form, keeping in mind that Billy Wilder was like the GOAT when he was alive.
Of all of his masterpieces, The Apartment is fondly remembered as the one that had him at the top of his A game. And they brought in newcomer Shirley MacLaine. I don't know if she was a newcomer at the time. Newcomer Shirley MacLaine, who would go on to Oscar glory in such great films as Terms of Endearment and yeah, known especially for the deep focus of the piece. The movie actually used forced perspective to play. Yeah, anyway, yeah. Enough of that.
There's a lot of deep focus in like interior, like in the movie in general, which is great, but especially in like interior scenes where you wouldn't think it would necessarily make sense to have it, but there's a lot of like foreground background action, a lot of really cool, like a lot of shots that are crowded with information. So there's always like stuff going on, and usually two things going on at once. Like all the stuff in C.C. Baxter's apartment.
Yep.
Where like, you know, someone's in the foreground doing something and someone's in the background doing something, and they kind of play off each other. Like that's all really cool. And it allows Wilder to sort of park the camera for long periods of time and not have to cut or move too much, and kind of let the scene sort of breathe and play out in a cool way.
Well, it's like something that's very clearly been lost in movies today, which I wonder if people would have a hard time sitting through so many takes of like, you can clearly see Jack Lemmon's legs. It's like, oh, you don't see anyone's legs in movie anymore. Like,
I know. The other thing is he's really, he never wastes a close-up. Like so much of the movie is shot from really far away. So like whenever there's a close-up on someone's face, it's like, it's a huge deal.
Well, so I didn't know anything about the movie going in, and I actually like it really is just a master working at the top of his game. Like everything he puts in there for the most part works, except maybe how creepy Jack Lemmon's character is to Shirley MacLaine in the beginning. Oh yeah, I looked up your file. Yeah, I know your first name, your last name, your social security's number, where you live, where you used to live. If you don't like me, I can, it's like, that's a little creepy and, par for its time, but like all the deep focus stuff works really well. All of the play in lights and shadows works really well. I think all the actors work really well. And Jack Lemmon's great in it.
I know, he's great as like the world's biggest simp. Simp? Someone who is like overly kind of affectionate and constantly giving and giving and giving and giving to a woman who's not going to waste
clearly
a breath
not
on
interested
him.
Yeah, which I guess could be like problematic looking at it today. It's like, except it's nice because he's like, oh, he really is just like fond of being potentially just friends with her. Like,
well, it's a weird dynamic because like on one level, like he is just like a really good dude and he is very sweet and he's always like really well intentioned.
Well, with one caveat, I would say he's clearly using the premise of the movie. He's clearly using the premise of the movie to move ahead in his company.
Yes,
like that's the only like truly selfish thing about him, and through that he gets walked over all the time. But it ends up paying off for him.
But like at a certain point, his utter lack of self-respect or I guess self-awareness almost becomes like it became kind of troublesome for me because it's like, dude, get your shit together, man. Like you can't let these people walk over you like this much. You can't be this big of like a toady, You're
going heavy on the slang today. Yes, I agree with you. I agree with you. I'm trying to pull up the information about the movie.
But it's funny because like I watched the movie with my girlfriend and she like, she's like, oh, she felt really bad for Baxter because he's like, oh, he's just a sweet guy like who means well and is constantly getting shit on. And I'm like, but it's like, come on, he's gotta make a move or do something, You can't constantly be deferring to his asshole boss.
Which we all knew that I don't know if you knew this, but like as I was watching it, I was like, okay, so his big moment is going to be him finally standing up to his boss.
Yeah, exactly.
Which you're like, okay, we know it's coming. We don't know when it's coming. And I think they do it in a way that is really satisfying. And you get it in different degrees to movies nowadays, but I thought that the progression of his character going from, professional doormat to like eventually finding what he wants to do out of life and realizing that, getting the corner office isn't necessarily all it's cracked up to be. And like, there's no point in having all this money if you can never, sleep when you have a cold.
Yeah.
I think they do it differently in movies. They pace it differently in movies nowadays, but I think it worked for the most part in this movie in particular. And also just a note, like the moment where he realizes that she is the person seeing his boss and like him just being completely crushed by it was so satisfying. There's a lot of stuff about this movie that's so satifying.
It's one of those things where it's like it always knows how to kind of size up whatever its moments are, Like when he gets the makeup thing with the cracked mirror and realizes that Fran is his boss's mistress. And he's just so crushed by it. Like, that is played really well. And the same way he kind of, like, very, almost flippantly stands up to his boss. Where it's like, his boss asks for the key, and he gives him the key. And then his boss, like, and then he leaves, and his boss walks into his office like, hey, you gave me the wrong key. He's like, no, I gave you the right one. Yep. And it's like, oh, that's pretty good.
Yeah, I thought that was a clever way of doing it. And I thought there's a lot I liked about this movie. Maybe, should we do you want to go into ratings now, what you would give it?
Sure.
All right.
I would say it's like a low to solid shiny and chrome.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think we're going to find a lot of things that are... Because I was going to say it's like a high witness, low shiny and chrome because I like it a lot. If anyone asks me, I would recommend that they watch it. But at the same time, I would almost say that it's just like a very solid movie.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's like the Ford v Ferrari, but like with Billy Wilder, with the Billy Wilder panache in it. In that sense of like the movie is very solid. It balances its tones really well. It has a lot of humor that I would say pushed against the Hays Code, although I think the Hays Code was gone by now. But a lot of that sort of like it was edgy for its time. I remember I was watching it with my fiance, and she was like, "Oh wow, this seems really edgy for a 1960s movie," and I was like, "It does seem kind of out there and kind of wild."
Well, and you have to keep in mind this movie came out in 1960, so it's really a 1950s movie.
Yeah, 1959. I mean, they even say like, "Oh, I made this much money in 1959," and then like the character work as well. Like, I think my favorite part of Billy Wilder's movies are the side characters. I don't know how much of Double Indemnity did you watch, but like Fred MacMurray, who's in both Double Indemnity and in The Apartment, his co-worker in Double Indemnity is played by Edward G. Robinson, who's a great character actor, and he has a lot of like these fun little character tics and fun little character moments. And like one of the things that I like about Billy Wilder movie is all of those little character moments coming forward. Yeah. So like you see that a lot in this movie with like the doctor who lives next door, the landlady, things like that.
I was gonna say I think everyone knows Edward G. Robinson, or at least kind of knows who he is from what was it, the Cincinnati Kid, where he's like, "You a good kid, real good. As long as I'm around, you'll always be second best, eh?"
Yeah, I've never seen that movie. I know him from Double Indemnity and The Stranger.
Huh.
Which is another classic movie that's on Netflix that you can watch, starring Orson Welles.
Okay.
Yeah, it's an interesting movie, and it's got an even more interesting history. But but anyway, back to The Apartment. Yeah, I like the characterization, and the characters are good, and like it's hard for Jack Lemmon to be that much of a doormat, and yet still be endearing to the audience and want him to win.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
it is such a tough like tightrope act in that sense, because at a certain point, like the dangerous game that Billy Wilder and Jack Lemmon are playing is like, this guy is he is a living doormat. You know, he's really pathetic, but he can't be so pathetic that you hate him.
Right.
You know, he still has to be sympathetic. So they really like walk that line pretty close, but I think it's pretty successful for the most part. I also really like his like you were talking about character tics, and he has that like kind of circular way of talking where he's like, "Well, I guess that's how it crumbles, you know, cookie wise."
The cookie wise.
Things like like, I love that little tick that he does and how that repeats throughout the movie. And then towards the end, like, Shirley MacLaine's character starts picking up on it. Mm-hmm. Like, I thought, like, that's a really nice bit of very subtle character work.
I agree. There's that. There's, like, his weird walk that he does throughout the whole movie. Like, I didn't pay much attention to it, but I think it kind of develops from like him kind of slunched over and like compacted as he's walking. It's kind of like this strange, almost like creature-like walk, and then as he goes through, I think maybe he gets like a spine, if that makes any sense. And yeah, I like how he talks like in circles like that. The recurring gin game, which actually drove me nuts, for the fact of like she's like, "Oh, I'm not very good at it." And he's like, "Oh, that's okay. I'm fantastic at it." And I'm like, "Oh no, I've been on this side before. I know how this is gonna go." And he just decimates her every hand. I was like, "Is this supposed to be funny? Is he that out of touch? What an asshole!"
Well, I think it's a, you know how like a lot of Paul Thomas Anderson movies have that thing where like there's a scene between two characters where there's like three things going on at the same time.
Yeah.
I think the gin game is an example of that, where it's like part of it is he is really out of touch and wants to play a gin game, and she is, you know, just tried to kill herself, so she's, you know, really doesn't want to do anything.
Right.
And then like at another level, like he recognizes that she's really depressed, so he's trying to keep her distracted and engaged with this game of gin.
Oh,
So,
no, I
like,
get that.
like his constant, like, well, don't worry. Like, she's like, I'm no good at Jim's like, well, don't worry, I'm great at it. Like, all that stuff is just trying to say, like, hey, come on. Just, like, engage with this.
Right. Just
Don't,
trying to keep her in the moment.
like,
trying
don't,
to keep her from thinking of what she's been thinking
yeah,
about.
like, don't, sort of collapse into yourself and start, ruminating. Like, just focus on the game of Jin.
Yeah, to which then he, like, destroys her in 2 consecutive hands. Like, oh, hey, it's not like she's depressed enough already. This game she's not really good at, let's just completely destroy her in it. That's what I mean of like he's a little out of touch, which is, it's clear throughout the movie that he is just a little bit out of touch with everything. Like, he's trying his best, but he's out of touch.
Well, it's like that great scene sort of towards the beginning when he gets his first promotion and Sheldrake, the personnel manager, brings him into his office and, is basically saying, like, I want to use your apartment. Mm-hmm. And, but he's, like, hinting at it.
Yes.
And Jack Lemmon just does not pick up on it. And so then he's like, it says in your report that you are what is, like...
Imaginative. You have a good imagination.
Attentive, observant, and imaginative. And then he's just like, huh?
Oh my God, this movie's so good.
I know.
Because I remember watching that scene, and, like, you can almost... what I also liked about it was, like, you're almost one step ahead of Baxter every time. Like, when he gets the call up to the office, it's like, oh, I bet you get fired. He's like, I bet I'm going to get a promotion. And, like, you're thinking, like, would he get fired? And the way that the conversation kind of starts, it almost seems like it. But then you're like, oh, wait, no. Knowing how this movie's going to work, I bet he's going to ask him for use of his apartment without asking him for it. And that's what happened. And you're like, yeah, that makes sense. And then, like, as soon as he's like, oh, I have 2 tickets to the Music Man if you're free. And she's like, oh, no, I kind of already have a date. Then you're kind of putting 2 and 2 together, like, right before Baxter. And you're like, oh, I have a feeling she's going to meet up with the boss if no one else can get to, if none of these other bosses can get to her. Yep. So all of those things I liked a lot as well.
It's interesting that in the movie, the audience is always, like, a step ahead of the lead, which, especially in today's age of, like, subverting expectations and not having any fucking clue where the story's going, is unusual. As much as I love surprises, I think we are now in an era where people will just do anything for a cheap surprise, even if it makes no fucking sense.
Game of Thrones Season 8. Oh, shit. Our fucking Star Wars Rise of Skywalker and The Last Jedi. Well, there's also something to be said for, like, because we touched upon it a bit in our Joker review, how, like, I thought that the humiliation of Arthur Fleck was going to be, like, so much more devastating than it actually was. Yeah. There's something about older movies where, like, characters getting devastated is an art form, and it just feels like you feel so bad at how purely pathetic they look at the end. Like, that moment, like we were saying, when like the compact, as soon as she's about to hand the compact to him, he's gonna look at it and realize what's going on and be completely crushed. And they sometimes do that in movies. You see it a lot more in television, I think, nowadays. But it's just so like brutal in the apartment. All of those little moments, all of those little realizations, like when he's standing outside of the Music Man and there's a huge crowd there and he's looking around, and then cut back to him like 5 minutes later when she's not coming, and he's just like still waiting for her even though the show's already started. So now he doesn't get to enjoy the Music Man. He's got a cold and he's been stood up. It's like, oh my God, the devastation.
I know.
It's also like I kind of commented on this at the beginning. I like how this is such a movie of its time period in some ways as well, specifically setting wise, where it's like, I don't know about you, but I have never been in an office building that has an elevator manager, except for like Disney World or Disneyland in an attraction where they like have to have someone there so that people don't mess it up.
I think that's an artifact of like old timey elevators that were probably too complicated.
Yeah, it's like you can't spell, but you can at least manage to press the right. But yeah, I guess so. Like where you'd have to like close 2 separate doors, press the correct button, and then like crank something or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
It's a manual elevator. All the elevator managers are like these really jacked dudes who just have to pull a rope to lift it up.
It's fucking Quasimodo in the bottom, just like sanctuary for elevators. Man, everyone needs a job somehow. Jesus fuck. It's like, yeah. You can't get a job typing out, but you can certainly get a job pressing elevator buttons.
Mm-hmm.
That was another fun character moment where she's like, "Oh no, I type fast enough. I just can't spell for shit." It's like, yeah, that would completely prevent you from getting a job as a secretary.
I know.
Oh man,
it's weird. Like that. Also, like secretaries used to be a big job, and that like you'd have to go to like typing school and get certified that you can type really fucking fast. It's like I can do over 150 words per minute.
Jesus Christ. And like the stenography and also shorthand, like the fact that shorthand was an art and now like we have shorthand on the internet, but it's like shitty. Like, do you ever think about that? Like my grandmother sent me a text message in shorthand one time and I was like, all right, I completely understand what she's saying, but this clearly looks like an artifact from like the 1970s or the 1960s. And like then you look at like something else that like a friend of yours sends and it's like the letter B, like out on balcony, lol, come fast, emoji, emoticon, and you're like, I feel like go ahead.
Would being like a stenographer or a secretary be easier now with like all the emojis and shit, or would it be more difficult because a lot of that shorthand slang is out of use?
I think it depends because like there are still courtroom stenographers, right? And then I don't know if they type in shorthand or if they have like a specialized keyboard that has like where it says like PLT for plaintiff or something like that. Are there a lot of stenographers out there still? Like I know legally they have to have them, but
yeah. Well, I mean, I was I was on jury duty maybe like 5 months ago, and yeah, there was some lady like hammering away at her keyboard.
Yeah, I know
in selection, so
I know for courtroom, I know that with like dictation software and everything now. I don't know how I don't know how frequent it is. Like I guess you'd have to do it for like documentary filmmaking. They have someone who like transcribes everything.
But if you're like an 80-year-old CEO, you're probably thinking like, I can't molest my software. I need a real secretary.
Hey, Baxter, I'm taking my computer over to your apartment tonight to get I can't have my wife knowing that I'm using our secured internet line to search porn.
Dude, when you said that, I was taking a sip of water and I almost choked / like sprayed it all over my audio recorder. Hey, buddy boy, I'm taking my computer over to your apartment.
Sir, I don't believe that's what the optical drive is used for. Jesus Christ. The Apartment 2020.
That just makes me think of Steve Jobs and Michael Fassbender. It's like, and the new Macintosh will be optimized for the program that everyone is going to want to use it for. Pornography.
Oh man, I wonder how many drafts of the script that like Sorkin's typing away. He's like, like draft like 285. Like Michael Fassbender just looks at it. He's like, no, I'm not saying this. Oh man, oh my god, that's so funny. I think everyone's using it for. Oh fuck. Oh my god. Oh. So the apartment.
The apartment.
Oh my god. Jeez. Fuck. Shirley MacLaine. I didn't know Shirley MacLaine acted before Terms of Endearment. Well, because speaking of she's in Downton Abbey, by the way.
What?
Just to bring it all back around.
Jeez Louise. I'm surprised anyone from this movie's still alive.
Well, Shirley MacLaine was probably like 16 in this movie. She wasn't, but I because she's like 80 something and still acting. I think.
She was like 26 in this movie.
Okay, all right, that's good. It's better than like I guess there was like a huge like time in the 90s where people were like, yeah, let's get this. We need someone to play this attractive woman. Let's get this 17-year-old to do it. Like, really? Ooh. Like, wow. Like, talk about 80-year-old bosses molesting their computers. Like, what the heck? Like, man.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about The Apartment given like the last few years shining a light on sexual abuse by kind of the corporate world and how just rampant it must have been at this time period. Like, I mean, literally, one of the managers like slaps Shirley MacLaine on the butt with a newspaper.
Yeah,
like just getting out of the elevator, like it's nothing, and she's like, "Hey, watch your hands, or you're gonna lose them."
Like that was the most retaliation they could do back in that time. It was like a slightly funny like wink of the eye joke to them. Oh, ho, ho, that was clever.
It's like, haha, don't do that again or I'll maim you, wink wink.
It's such a movie of its time.
That really is.
I mean, obviously the whole like, oh, the boss and his secretary is like, one of those like open secret jokes, but like even out here it's just like one of the main, points of conflict in the movie is like, oh, he used to have sex with me, his secretary, and now he has sex with you, the elevator girl. He's really moving down in the world, like.
Or it's like how everyone is like trying to get their fuck on at the Christmas party. like the entire office is like making out with each other at the Christmas party, and I'm like, what the hell is going on? Like.
Such a different world. You mean that doesn't happen at your Christmas parties? If you even have them?
Yeah, we have Christmas parties. That does not happen. Like people get shwasted, but they don't, do any of that shit.
Well, and I wonder how much of that is like made up, like, oh, I bet this is what happens at Christmas parties that I have never attended since I live in Hollywood and make movies where I'm not invited to Christmas parties, or like how much of that is just like, this is what happens in Hollywood. It must therefore happen in all other businesses.
Something tells me that, like, in the 1950s, people really cut loose at Christmas parties.
Sorry, honey, I'll be at my annual Christmas party today. I won't be home for a couple of hours, like fucking feeling up everyone.
Here's how much I think that's true, because it is a meme in, like, boomer culture that, like, crazy shit happens at Christmas parties, right? So... Like, if that's a meme in their culture, I feel like there has to be some truth to it,
Some boomer is like, they're onto us.
Yeah, well, because think about this, right? Remember the episode of SpongeBob where Patrick has his secret box, and SpongeBob is like, what? Like, what's in the box? And then the thing that he's most terrified of is an embarrassing photo of him from the Christmas party.
Wait, this is the SpongeBob episode?
Yes! So the implication is that, like, crazy shit happens at Christmas parties. Or there's another episode of SpongeBob, oddly enough, where, like, they adopt a clam, and SpongeBob and Patrick adopt a clam and raise it like their baby. And Patrick goes to work, quote unquote, and, like, he comes back in his suit with a lampshade on his head like he's been partying all night. So I feel like this weird, like, there's like this like boomer silent generation symbolism of like Christmas party, lampshade on head, like behind closed doors, like crazy shit's going on at these like after work social events.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, because like, isn't that how like Mad Men survived for 10 years? Is just like, can you believe the amount of rampant sexism in the 60s? And like all the men going, let's bring it back.
Yeah, and it's also like societies that are that buttoned up usually have like crazy underground like subcultures and stuff.
Right, yeah, that's
it's
true.
like how like all the most depraved shit comes out of like East Germany because they're so repressed by the Soviet Union. Like it just comes out in the most extreme ways. It's kind of like in the 1970s and 80s, like the American conception of dance music was like disco, which is really harmless. And then like East German dance music is like this industrial, like everyone's wearing fishnets and there's all this bondage shit. And it's like, you know, people like hissing in this ultra guttural German.
We gotta take down the system, man. We gotta do everything we can to be against the system. It makes sense. It makes sense.
So, yeah.
Like how people who are like from families that are like hyper religious are like death metal rockers who worship Satan.
I know. It's like the whole. It's like the whole stereotype of chicks who go to Catholic school.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah.
It's that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if the just batshit crazy Christmas party in the apartment is at least somewhat
inspired by fact.
Inspired by fact, yeah.
Well, but like to that end, like wouldn't the person who'd be going wild at the Christmas party, wouldn't it be like CC Baxter? Because he's like has a couple of drinks in him and he's like, I'm gonna fuck everything I see. Like
that's like, wait, have you seen Blue Velvet?
No.
Oh, there's a great part where frickin' shit, what's his name?
Kyle MacLachlan?
No, the bad guy.
Oh fuck. Dennis Hopper.
Dennis Hopper. Dennis Hopper like inhales a shitload of nitrous oxide and then he goes like, whoa! I'll fuck anything that moves, man. So when you said that, I just imagined CC Baxter acting like Dennis Hopper from Blue Velvet.
Jack Lemmon was like Jack Lemmon could have been Dennis Hopper from Blue Velvet.
Oh my god, that would have been amazing.
Anytime I think of like old Jack Lemmon, I just think of him in Hamlet from Kenneth Branagh's Hamlet, like reading cue cards because he couldn't memorize everything because he's so old. He's like, oh, but see there, Horatio, something bad comes asunder from afar. Hark that we were to be like, oh my god. Just imagine him being like, woo, I would fuck anything right now, Horatio. Oh my god. It's also weird because the only exposure I have to Jack Lemmon is through Billy Wilder movies. And Hamlet, of course.
And Kenneth Branagh's Hamlet.
And Kenneth Branagh's Hamlet.
I forgot how stuffed with cameos that movie is.
Oh yeah, man. Like aside from like Derek Jacobi, who's in everything, Kenneth Branagh, you got Kenneth Branagh and Robin Williams. The only thing you're missing is Kevin Kline, and then you have like all three of them who are all kind of similar in some regard.
Yeah, but it's really... like, I mean, you got Rufus Sewell, you got
who has
Williams,
one line in the whole movie.
I know. You have Gerard Depardieu. You have Richard Attenborough.
Yep.
Judi Dench. Billy Crystal as the Gravedigger.
Oh god, Billy Crystal's cameo. Ugh.
So cringy.
Ugh.
You have Timothy Spall as Rosencrantz.
Right, coming in on that like little train that looks like it was like out of Walt Disney's backyard. Fuck, I love that movie so much. It's like, sure, well this little train was already on the property. We'll just have it, just bring them in. Fucking Charlton Heston. Judi Dench, who has no lines in the movie.
Yep.
So anyway, yeah, Jack Lemmon. Yeah, the only thing that movie was missing was Fred MacMurray if he wasn't already dead.
Wait, yeah. Hamlet or The Apartment?
In Hamlet.
Oh,
like, get Fred MacMurray to play as like some role here or there. I don't know. I'm checking to see when, because it's funny because like in Double Indemnity, he's like the young stud, and then 15 years later, he's like the gray fox. Mm-hmm. But I'm actually surprised he made it as far as he did with a last name like MacMurray. Like no offense, but like no offense to the Irish, I guess. But like I don't know, it doesn't seem like it'd be the name that would catch you on a poster. You know what I mean? Like
yeah, well, especially because like old school Hollywood would waspify like every person's name.
Right. Yeah, we've gone over that with some of our favorites.
Yeah.
But that was yeah. I guess it was okay though because it was like already Irish sounding, so they're like, oh, it's fine.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is like, I don't know, MacMurray. Is it that like would it need to be changed if we were old timey Hollywood executives? Would we force him to change his name?
I mean, if it were you and me, maybe. Because they're like, it's really hard to do those lowercase AC before another capital M. Mm-hmm. It's just the artists are not going to like that for the posters. But
how about Fred Murray? You're Fred Murray now, kid. You can
why
thank
can't
me
we
later.
just be Fred Murray? He's like, no, if it's Fred MacMurray, it'll stand out. Like some other, like Billy Wilder, I guess.
I guess, yeah.
I don't know.
Your new name's Fred MacMurray, and now you're going to get a lobotomy.
Fred... You know what's weird is the movie won for best editing.
A movie with all these long takes won for best editing.
Yeah, like that's the one. Like it won Best Picture, I believe.
Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Original Screenplay.
Best Picture, Best Director, Best Original Screenplay, well deserved, and Best Film Editing for some reason. Mm-hmm. Nominated for Best Cinematography, Best Actor, Best Actress, and Best Supporting Actor, who I'm guessing is the Jewish doctor who, like, speaking of which, the stomach pumping scene, I was surprised at. Mm-hmm. And so, okay, there's three things that surprised me about that. I'm going to just arbitrarily say three. One, the stomach pumping scene, and that you can actually like hear her puking. She's like, yeah. I was like, oh wow, that's pretty intense. After that, when he like picks her up and is like shoving coffee in her, he's like, wake up, slap, slap. Do you know where you are? Slap, slap. And Louise, and my girlfriend's or my fiance's like, what? Like, what the hell are they doing? And I'm like, it's the 1960s for you, I guess.
It's kind of hard to watch. Although it's interesting because Jack Lemmon is also like, Jesus, man, take it easy.
Yeah. That's true. He's like, oh my God, does it really have to be this extreme? And then the last thing is like when he goes back into his bathroom and he's like looking in the medicine cabinets and he's like removing the razor blade from the razor and like moving all of the stuff. And like I was like, I bet this is gonna come back after when he like goes and tries to shave and he forgets that his razor's not in there. And then like lo and behold, like a gag from Avengers, he like is starting to shave. I was like, wow, that took a long time to come back around in this scene. Mm-hmm. But I found it funny, and I'm like, is it bad that I find all of his preventative measures to make sure she doesn't attempt suicide again? Is it bad that I'm finding this really funny and not like terribly like concerning? So yeah, those were the three things I thought was interesting about that scene. If you were in if you have a comment, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh no, I don't. I just thought all that stuff was pretty funny.
Yeah, I thought it was funny too, but I was also like, and I'm wondering if they were playing the intense like heavy slaps for comedy.
I don't know.
Jack Lemmon didn't even know. Shirley MacLaine comes afterwards and she's got like bruises everywhere. Like
I know they had to stop filming for 3 days to let the swelling go down.
It's like, unfortunately, we got to do it again. It's like, what the hell? They end up going with the first take anyway. Like, movie magic, people. Actually, like to the note about it being well edited, like moment to moment, the movie actually was really well edited.
Yeah, like, well, it's funny because it's got that classical editing style that just feels so effortless.
Yes, but I mean, even in older movies, like even in Casablanca, there's a lot of like moment to moment editing that is like, oh, how did that happen? Like, oh, these shots clearly don't match up really well. like moment to moment, everything seemed seamless because a lot of it was like cut on action or a nice push in or here and there. But I think the other reason it kind of gets the award is because it almost feels like two very strong ideas happening, because you have the first part, which is like all about the affair, and then like the second part, which kind of focuses on like the suicide watch, and like it all flowed together really seamlessly, like moment to moment and within the movie. Because I think like she commits suicide with like half the movie left, or she attempts to commit suicide, I should say, because she clearly doesn't succeed, with like half of the movie left. And I was like, oh my god, what are they going to do to entertain us for another full hour?
It's always interesting when that happens. Like, there's this huge thing that goes on. It's like, oh my god, this is the climax of the movie. And then you like look at the time code and you're like, we're not even halfway to the end.
And you're just like, oh my god, I hope the rest of the movie isn't this long. And then, yeah, they thinking back to it, like they had to cram a fuck ton of shit in this movie, because like you have to have like the setup, which they, not knowing anything about the movie, the fact that like we're watching it and then he's like, yep, and my apartment's in use, until 8:00, and I go back to my apartment, and we're like, I'm watching and I'm like, does he just have like a really shitty roommate? And like it explains everything so well without explicitly stating what's happening until like 15 minutes in, when like he goes into Fred MacMurray's office and it's like, okay, well, if you didn't know what's going on, here's what's going on, like for the 5 people in the audience who don't know. But again, done in a very clever way, because like it's very easy, like it's not like they're two buddies who are like, hey Baxter, how's it going? Oh, it's pretty good, but I have this cold. Oh, you have a cold? I can tell because your nose is running. His nose isn't running. Is it because you always have other people checking out your apartment? Why would you do that, MacMurray or Baxter? Like they do a good job of avoiding that sort of like really bad exposition dialogue type thing. But yeah, they had to set that up, and then like,
dude, the scene where he has the cold and he's checking his temperature while trying to like reschedule everyone's appointment in his apartment, all done in one shot, is so good.
It is, yeah, it's amazing. Like, and I'm sure they shot around it. Like they had to shoot some coverage, but it's amazing that he could do it all in one take. There were a couple of times where he's like thinking to himself, I wonder if he was like legitimately trying to remember which page he had to turn back to write down the person's stuff and like on the call. I didn't even think about that. I mean, I know there's a lot of shots in there that are, unbroken oneers through the movie. Oh my, I felt so bad for him when he was sick, even though it was the most like staged sickness I'd ever seen in my life.
I know. He's got just like pockets full of used Kleenex and stuff.
God, that was so funny.
And his weird like nasal spray juice that like he sprays all over that one room.
It's like, oh no, I always keep everything together. I never let anything out. Squirt. Like I see what you did there. Well, I always thought it was funny that he was so good at being consistent on which pocket he put the dirty handkerchiefs in. Like he had a system. Oh my god. Oh man. It was good. I really liked it a lot. It was a good recommendation, sir. Would you say it's one of the best movies ever made?
I wouldn't go that far. It is a really good movie though.
Really? What do you think holds it back from being one of the best?
I don't know. It's one of those things where like everything's good. A lot of things are great, but it doesn't have that kind of transcendent quality that, greatest of all time movies I would think should have.
Huh. Like, what do you think is like a close equivalent to it, where it's like, where it's like it's a movie that is seen as really good? Because, yeah, well, in my mind, it's just it feels a little too effortless and contemporary. Like that's like the thing that's holding it, that would potentially be holding it back for me, is like it seems like this movie was it's too perfectly executed. Now, with that said, I can easily see this as being, one of those, like I could easily see it being on a top 10 list or on a top 20 list of like these are the greatest movies ever. But like, I guess you're right about the like extraneous thing, because like Citizen Kane had all of those, luxurious deep focus shots mixed with like insane amounts of optically printed, stuff with a story that was told in a unique way, and it was like non-linear and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then I guess Vertigo's another contender for greatest movies ever made. And
yeah, I mean, I think Vertigo, I have problems with that movie, but Citizen Kane, I think, is a good comparison for The Apartment, because they're both movies where there's nothing I don't like about them, and there's a lot of great stuff, but like they're not. Neither movie blew me away,
Yeah. I'd be interested to re-watch The Apartment, because every time I watch Citizen Kane, there's a new avenue that's opened up to me, which is another reason why I think like it's great. So here's another question for you. Do you think there are any movies made in America, like in the studio system, for you between the years 1921 and 1970 that you would consider one of the best movies ever made?
Lawrence of Arabia.
All right, good call. Yeah.
Because if there's one movie that was made before 1970 that did absolutely like blow me away, it's Lawrence of Arabia. That's top 10 greatest ever movies in my opinion.
Yeah, I can see that. It's funny because I've seen Lawrence of Arabia and I've seen Ben-Hur, and of the two, I would actually prefer watching Lawrence of Arabia more than Ben-Hur. Have you seen Ben-Hur?
No, I'm not.
Okay. Ben-Hur, I'd actually be interested if you ever watch it to see what you think of it, because everything about it is really well done, but for some reason it has some weird pacing issues. That's what I'll say about it. It's got some weird pacing issues near the end.
But it's funny because like Lawrence of Arabia, I think, has some intentionally weird pacing issues. Like a long take of the sun rising slowly over the horizon in real time, stuff like that.
Yeah, that or like Omar Sharif like riding towards T.E. Lawrence and his goon who's going to be killed immediately, and like done in like 5 shots. Like over the span of like a minute and a half, and you're like, really? This sounds pretty good. But it adds.
But I think it adds to the movie,
Oh yeah, it adds to the epic feel.
Oh, absolutely.
So good. Lawrence of Arabia is fantastic. For a movie that doesn't. Of course you would like it. It doesn't have a lot of the typical Hollywood like. Like there's no, unless you count the relationship between T.E. Lawrence and Omar Sharif. There's no romance, and there's like conflict, but the conflict develops really slowly. I mean, I guess the only thing that's like really Hollywood about it is that there's a lot of white people in brown face.
Yeah, the best being Alec Guinness as an Arab prince.
With like, he sounds like a little bit like Obi-Wan Kenobi and a little bit like he's really trying hard to do the accent.
I know.
Oh, hello there. Ew, so bad.
And there's a lot of like Mexican guys or Mexicans and Puerto Ricans playing like Arabs and Turkish people.
Well, like, wasn't it shot in Morocco?
I don't know where it was shot, but it's just like you have Anthony Quinn, who's Mexican, as Auda Butai, and you have Jose Ferrer as like the Turkish sergeant or whatever.
Lawrence of Arabia is amazing. So okay, all right. That was 1966. So nothing, but you don't think there's any other like classic Hollywood studio movie that you would say is like, this is the greatest movie? Like, you don't think the golden age of Hollywood produced anything that you would say is like the greatest movie ever?
No. I mean, the other movie that is before 1970 that would fall into greatest movie ever territory would be Once Upon a Time in the West, which is Italian.
Was that 68 or was that 70? I think
68.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'd say that's okay. Well, is it because a lot of the classic Hollywood style movies just feel so, I don't know,
similar?
I guess so. Yeah. Because even though they're all different, they all have like, yeah. Is that why?
Yeah, some of them to an extent start to blur together in a lot of ways. Like they're all very similar. There's like a formula that you're kind of almost government mandated at the time to follow.
Right, because of the Hays Code.
Yeah, and they're just constrained by the time period that they were made in for the most part. So it's tough to find anything that is like really amazing, like greatest of all time type of filmmaking. There's a lot of great stuff, but it's all like the greatest stuff of that era, I think, falls short of the greatest of all time for the most part. I think it's also like,
yeah,
like so much stuff has changed between then and now in terms of like, well, in every aspect of filmmaking, but like think about like acting, for example, how acting was so like theatrical back in that time period and very stylized.
Well,
like kind of naturalistic acting was innovative in the 1960s, you know?
Right. The funny thing in old like 1930s and 40s movies is like when they go to kiss someone else, it's basically two actors, like their faces as firm as possible, just like touching their lips together and then separating with like it's like if you take two water bottles and smush them together and bring them apart, like that's kissing in the 1940s. I always found that funny. Yeah, it's weird because like Casablanca, I would say, is an amazing movie and like one everyone should watch. But I always feel like Michael Curtis's movies are like a lot about cutting corners. So like even with Casablanca, I'm like, it's great. The script is great. The way that the story is told and the way it progresses is really good. But it like if someone else made it, it still would have been great. You know, I don't know. I don't know. Like, because there's a lot of like iconography you can take from like the 1930s and 40s and movies, and even in the 50s, that I think you can blend together in your mind to like come up with like an amazing feeling movie. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like it kind of does movies a disservice if you're like if there's like nothing that came out in that era that you'd be like, this is the best. And it's possible that maybe there is something out there that you've seen, but it is also hard because the studio system is so it was so like homogenized throughout.
Yeah. It's a shame because it's like I always like checking out these older movies that are from that classical era, and you know some of them are really 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 good, but it's hard to find ones that are like, you know, that really just blow me away, or you know, that I'll remember forever and ever as like, wow, I really treasure having seen this movie.
It's very rare that I'll see a movie from that time period that I'm like, this was a complete waste of my time. This movie should have never been made. You know, like there's a lot of movies made now that I feel like that, but a lot of the classic movies, I'm usually surprised. I'm usually surprised at the content that they cover, given their restrictions, which, again, I find I like. That's why I like watching movies by certain directors, like a lot of the Billy Wilder movies where he's like clearly trying to push the envelope. I like the fact that there are the directors who are trying to work within that system and push it forward, but also what could they get away with and how far could they get away with it? Like it's weird watching, for example, even though it's kind of in a different time period, but Seven Samurai, and like all of these people are dying, and they're dying because like the good guys are just like awkwardly stabbing them with swords, and you're like, I guess that constitutes a death. Like we've come a long way in movie violence in Seven Samurai, but it's the same thing with movies in like the 40s where like someone will be shot and they'll seize up like they've been shot, but like there's no blood, there's no bullet holes. You know, it's like, was he even shot? Like did the air kill him? Yeah, it's funny. It is the movies clearly are like of their time.
Yeah. Oh, you know, there is one movie I've seen from that era that is, I would consider, an absolute waste of time. The Maltese Falcon.
Oh, that's perfect. Oh my god. Oh wow. That's true. I was looking at my phone a lot during that movie for being such an iconic movie. Like,
well, it's one of those things where it's like, I don't know, man. It's so boring. The whole, like, for a mystery movie, it sucks that they reveal the answer to the mystery like 10 minutes in. And then the rest of the movie is all of the main characters sitting in a room talking about, well, what do we do now? and then Humphrey Bogart occasionally slaps someone in that weird, awkward way that he does, where it looks like he's trying to dust some like breadcrumbs off their coat, but somehow dusts their coat so hard he knocks them out.
I just want to remake every single Humphrey Bogart movie with Harrison Ford, like not young Harrison Ford, but like Harrison Ford from the 70s.
Harrison Ford.
Yep, doing his like super awkward theatrical punching
with his like slapstick reactions to everything.
Yeah, and his like over the top wind up, like, dude, this is not a video game. You don't have to charge up your fist to hit this guy.
That would be a good edit to go through like every Harrison Ford action scene and put like a meter on like how much he's charging up his punch.
It'll be especially good in the Indiana Jones movies.
Oh yeah, he winds up so much where he looks like he's trying to throw a javelin or something and then punches the guy.
You're like, I think this fight could have been settled a lot earlier if you didn't have such a big backswing to it there, Harry.
I know, it's so funny too, because it's like, especially like a lot of action movies where you have like people who know how to fight, you know, like they're not winding up at all. They're, you know, a proper punch, you just throw it straight from rest, you know,
right?
And then just Harrison Ford is like throwing a baseball with his hand.
God, Harrison Ford's awesome. Fuck. I guess it wouldn't be an episode of Under the Wheels Reborn if we didn't somehow awkwardly work Harrison Ford into it.
I know, seriously.
Oh man.
Is Harrison Ford the new Tom Hardy in terms of being like Under the Wheels mascot?
I mean, but I think it only works because like with Tom Hardy, we legitimately acknowledge that he's a good actor, a great actor, one of the best. Mm-hmm. Like you can put Tom Hardy in like any movie role and he'll be able to work in it. Except apparently This Means War. I guess maybe he should stay away from romantic comedies. Although I would love to see him in like a straight, like, You Got Mail 2020 version. He plays Tom Hanks's character. Of course, The equivalent of that was Legend, and we all saw how that worked out. Everybody died. But like with Harrison Ford, there's like a certain, like, I feel like we have a certain amount of respect, but like we also recognize that he's so charismatic that his flaws become endearing.
Yes,
like his mumbling and like his really hokey voiceovers. It's all like, it's great, and I love it, and I like half ridicule it, but really I enjoy it. So and he is legitimately good. Like, yeah, in most, like, he's in a remake of Sabrina. Speaking of Humphrey Bogart, and Harrison Ford replacing all Humphrey Bogart's roles. He replaced Humphrey Bogart's role in that movie, and I'm like, well, yeah, I wouldn't mind seeing it because I genuinely like Harrison Ford in movies. Mm-hmm. But anyway, I thought the perfect part to end was when you're like, oh, there's one movie in that I think is complete trash. And that was The Maltese Falcon, and I'm like, well, on that note,
I know. I really do genuinely hate The Maltese Falcon.
Have you seen The Big Sleep?
Yeah, I mentioned that as the movie that got me to actually like Humphrey Bogart.
Okay, that's right. I've seen half of it, and I really like it.
Yeah, I like The Big Sleep as well. I think it's good.
But I'm also, I think, who directed The Maltese Falcon? Because I don't...
Is it Howard Hawks?
No, he wouldn't have directed The Maltese Falcon, I don't think. He did The Big Sleep. It was John Huston.
I get John Huston and Howard Hawks mixed up constantly.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I don't blame you. That's funny. I have to see Treasure of the Sierra Madre, but I will say that John Huston is not one of my favorite directors.
No,
like,
he's not. I have seen Treasure of the Sierra Madre, and it's okay.
It's okay. Yeah, I've seen The African Queen, and again, it's... Someone had said once that, like, if you're making a movie, like, if you're making a romantic movie, you should have some other plot element. It cannot live and die on romance alone. Well, the African Queen has another plot to the movie, but it's mainly about two characters falling in love, and they fall in love like halfway through the movie. So the other half of the movie, you're like, God, how much of this lovey-doveyness do I have to endure? I also, if you've never heard of it, The Man Who Would Be King, starring Sean
I've heard of it, with Sean Connery and Michael Caine.
Michael Caine, and there's who else? There was one other guy in it who is Christopher Plummer is in it. Like it's a weird like combination. I fell asleep while watching that movie. So John Huston, great in Chinatown, not necessarily a favorite director of mine. Mm-hmm. Not like Billy Wilder, who everything I've seen of his I've liked.
Yeah.
So I'd be interested to go back and watch Sunset Boulevard, given that the 7 Year Itch is really good, Double Indemnity is really good, and The Apartment is really good. Mm-hmm. He's what I would call a solid director. Like back in the 40s and 50s, I would go out and see any movie he made. He's kind of like I don't know who his equivalent would be. It's like the Nancy Meyers of today.
Well, okay, writer-director known for sharp wit, good dialogue, and strong visuals.
Writer-director.
Tarantino? P.T. Anderson, maybe?
Probably closer to Paul Thomas Anderson. Because just because like Tarantino, his movies can devolve into kind of juvenilia, whereas Paul Thomas Anderson... Well, they can. I mean,
that's true.
Like Tarantino did push the medium forward in the sense of like, oh, look at all these pop culture references we can do, and like, look at how violent we can be. But like, I think Paul Thomas Anderson is controversial statement. I think Paul Thomas Anderson is probably a better writer than Quentin Tarantino.
I would agree with that.
And I think visually, Paul Thomas Anderson's movies. I'm going to get shit again, but I think visually Paul Thomas Anderson's movies in general are more interesting and less derivative.
I would also agree with that.
Yeah.
No, so here's the thing, right? So Paul Thomas Anderson and Quentin Tarantino are like really good buddies. And it's funny because Tarantino always portrays their friendship as like a friendly rivalry. And it's like, but you're not that close. That's like Kevin Smith and Christopher Nolan saying that they have a friendly rivalry.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say it's more like Kevin Smith and Quentin Tarantino saying they have a friendly rivalry.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like Kevin Smith and Tarantino saying they have a friendly rivalry. It's like, Tarantino's really good, but Paul Thomas Anderson's on a whole other level.
Yeah. Yeah, but Paul Thomas Anderson also comes out with a movie like once every like 6 years. Tarantino's, I think, a little bit more consistent in coming out with movies.
Is he though?
Every 4 years. Takes him about 2 years to write and get it cast and then put him out. So it's usually about every 4. Okay. You know one funny thing about Paul Thomas Anderson?
What?
So Robert Altman, when he made A Prairie Home Companion, you might already know this, but Robert Altman, when he made A Prairie Home Companion, he had to sign like the insurance declaration, and he had to name another director to take over in the event that he died because he was like 80 and on death's door.
Okay.
The person who was supposed to take over A Prairie Home Companion if Robert Altman died was Paul Thomas Anderson.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, you know, they have some kind of a connection because...
Agreed.
Like Robert Altman is famous for the like huge cast of characters, complex dialogue scenes with lots of people talking over each other, all recorded with multiple microphones simultaneously, using like a lot of like tracking shots and long takes and things like that.
Yeah.
But
like boring tracking shots.
Which is a staple of Paul Thomas Anderson, especially in his early days with like Hard Eight, Boogie Nights, even like
Magnolia and Punch Drunk
Love. Well, Magnolia as well, but even Punch Drunk Love to kind of a lesser extent.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, Altman has a big influence on him. I remember listening to an interview with Anderson and the Safdie brothers, and they talked a lot about Robert Altman and his sound recording techniques, and Anderson used that a lot for especially his early movies that were more like ensemble focused.
The movies with Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Mm-hmm. Which is interesting because like even though I think people sort of remember Anderson's earlier movies more fondly, I like his more recent stuff a lot more, especially, There Will Be Blood and The Master.
Right. Well, and I would say Punch Drunk Love is when he finally stopped being kind of Tarantino-y and became more of his own self. I would say There Will Be Blood is the movie where he turned the corner. But
yeah, there's a very sudden style change from everything before There Will Be Blood to There Will Be Blood.
Yeah, I mean that's clear. Like, because I don't find his other movies nearly as engaging. Like, I think Hard Eight's really interesting. I've never watched Boogie Nights. I don't remember anything about Magnolia. I like Punch Drunk Love a lot, but I would say that I got on the train with There Will Be Blood and The Master, and I like, at the very least, I find his movies interesting, because like this whole comparison with Billy Wilder for me breaks down once I think of Inherent Vice, and I was like, that's one of the few movies I've seen where, like, as I'm watching it, I'm like, this movie looks like a disaster and a train wreck, and they just kind of had to get it out there. Like, the only other movie I've seen that reminds me of that is Public Enemies with Johnny Depp and directed by Michael Mann. I'm like watching Public Enemies and I'm like, the movie won't end, but it's a train wreck and it's just boring. And I've tried to watch it twice now too, and I can't get through it. I'm like, the hell's wrong with this movie?
I've seen every one of Anderson's movies except for Inherent Vice.
I'm being hard on it. I know people who have, I think they said that it's more cohesive than the novel, which is not saying much.
It's not saying a whole lot. Every Thomas Pynchon novel is an exercise in frustration trying to read.
I'm surprised they get published.
He's considered like one of the greatest writers ever. You know
how you know you're a great writer? Because people can't read your books. James Joyce.
I know. That's the James Joyce philosophy of writing.
That's why I'm surprised, like, people are getting, like, this book is so deep. It's got its layers have layers. Like, who is publishing these aside from academia? Like, who
that's the thing.
in the right
It's like,
mind would publish Ulysses?
Like, Gravity's Rainbow seems to be, something that only academics can get a whole lot out of. Because, like, it's weirdly on the nose in a lot of places. And Benoit Blanc, yeah. But it's just, like, it's weirdly on the nose in a lot of places, but then a lot of, like, what is happening right now, moment to moment, is almost inscrutable. So it's really bizarre. But yeah, I mean, of all of Paul Thomas Anderson's movies, like, I really like Hard Eight, Boogie Nights, and Magnolia. I like all of them to some degree or another.
I like Hard Eight.
I like
Hard Eight.
I think the thing with Hard Eight, Boogie Nights, Magnolia, and Punch Drunk Love is that they're all inconsistent in the sense that they all have good stuff, but they also all have, like, great stuff where it's just, like, a handful of scenes are transcendently amazing in those movies. And then once he turns the corner with There Will Be Blood, like, that type of filmmaking and that type of ability to just electrify the screen is the whole movie. Yeah. You know what I mean? Okay. Like in Boogie Nights, there's a scene where it's like this weird one-off where the main characters, Marky Mark, John C. Reilly, and one other guy try to rob Alfred Molina. Mm-hmm. And it's the only scene Alfred Molina's in the whole movie. And it's so good. Like, it's just hilarious and tense and uncomfortable. And, like, I don't know, it's one of those things where you watch it and you're like, how did he do this? How did he make this scene so good? But it stands out from the rest of the movie because it is so amazing and the rest of the movie is, like, good.
Good.
Meanwhile, like, every scene in The Master is like that. Almost.
Right. Well, anytime Jesse Plemons shows up, I'm like, why the fuck did you cast Jesse Plemons? But that's how I feel a lot of the time with Jesse Plemons. Except for, like, a handful of movies. I guess that's it's hard to compare, bringing it back to The Apartment. I guess that's why it's hard for me to compare any other director to Billy Wilder, which, by the way, he directed Sabrina. I didn't know that, so I feel stupid. But, like, I feel like Billy Wilder is one of those directors where, like, so, like, every director has something that they're not good with. In Paul Thomas Anderson's case, he can't make short movies, which is not like a flaw, but it's like something like if you're like, oh, bring in a movie bring in a 90-minute movie. It's like, he probably can't do that. I'm just using it as an example. I feel like Billy Wilder does not have a weakness. Like, I feel like he's one of those directors who can take a genre that he wouldn't normally be interested in and rework it to match his own personal taste. Like, that's why I think Double Indemnity is so interesting, because it's got all of the film noir cliches in it, but he also has like this, he's like, well, I've got to add my own sense of like my own flair to it. It's got really lighthearted moments, which make the dramatic moments even more, punctuated even more. It's got really interesting and fun characters. Like, I don't know if there's a director out there now who's able to do that. Like, I feel like there are a few who are able to kind of take a genre over, like the guy who did The Last Stand and Once Upon a Time, or no, sorry, The Good, the Bad, the Weird, like in Korea. But I don't know how many people, if like if you gave Tarantino like, oh, you have to do a film noir, he'd be like, okay, I'll do a film noir, but it wouldn't really be a film noir. It'd just be like Tarantino with
the guy who
film
did The
noir
Good,
elements.
the Bad, and the Weird is the dude who did Tale of Two Sisters.
Yes, and that's why like he's like his like I Saw the Devil was like a torture porn movie, but like he just like completely hijacked it and changed it so that like instead of the bad guy doing all the torturing, it was the good guy doing the torturing, and like put a lot of meaning behind like why he's torturing it instead of just like torture for torture's sake. So like like The Good, the Bad, and the Weird, it's like it's a Western in Manchuria or wherever it takes place in, and it's like, but it's got a bunch of like, but it's like the weirdest Western you've ever seen. Not the weirdest you've ever seen, but for one that relies on a lot of the Western tropes, it's like hyper stylized and like, I don't know, it's weird. But even him, like, I don't know anyone who can like meld. I forgot who it was. There was another director who was really good at melding into different genres like pretty seamlessly. But like, I feel like Billy Wilder is definitely one of those people. Anyway, enough. I would say Billy Wilder is one of the best directors of all time by far. Like, without a doubt, I feel like he's just because he's so consistent and consistently good, which is kind of what I look for. Like, it's the same with like, I mean, I know you disagree with this, but like for me, Spielberg is consistent and consistently good. And he can jump into different genres, but he also has his own package that he brings into every movie. Like Scorsese is consistent and consistently good, and Paul Thomas Anderson, Quentin Tarantino, like, but not to the same level that like Billy Wilder is, where like I can put any Billy Wilder movie on and like people will enjoy it, I think. Now, with that said, I have a sample size of 5. I think, 5. So maybe I'll have to delve a little bit deeper into this to see. But
I mean, I have a sample size of really just 1.
Any last thoughts on The Apartment?
No, I mean, it's a really good movie.
It is.
And it's one of those movies where you don't have to worry if it's like the main character goes through a lot of shit, or both main characters go through a lot of shit, but you don't have to worry if it's all gonna like work out in the end, because it's an old Hollywood movie and you know it's gonna have a happy ending and you can walk away feeling all right about it.
Yeah. I mean, does it though? Like, he confesses that he loves her and she's just like, draw a fucking card.
Well, no, because she's like,
Yeah, it is. I know. I'm just being difficult, as they say. You know what? Before we go, one last question for you. Billy Wilder, better director than Alfred Hitchcock?
Ooh. I like The Apartment better than most Hitchcock movies I've seen. I've seen a lot of Alfred Hitchcock. Because, okay, Alfred Hitchcock...
Not to go on another tangent here, but I'm actually genuinely interested in this.
Alfred Hitchcock is an interesting cat. Let me see. I'm trying to think. I'm trying to list all the movies of his that I've seen. Because the other thing is he made like a bajillion movies.
Right.
But okay, so I've seen Marnie, The Birds, Psycho, North by Northwest, Vertigo, Rear Window, Strangers on a Train.
Oh, Strangers on a Train's so good.
I've seen bits of Rope. I've seen
Rope.
Shadow of a Doubt. That's a pretty good one. I've seen Rebecca. I've seen The Lady Vanishes. And
Dial M for Murder?
Nope.
Oh.
I would say out of all those, out of all those, Strangers on a Train is really good. The Lady Vanishes is really good, and Shadow of a Doubt is pretty good. The rest are all like in that range of like whatever to like solid.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think Psycho, speaking of like subverting expectations, like if it hadn't been spoiled for everyone since the beginning of time, it would be a lot more effective than it is. Because you watch it knowing what's going to happen, and you're like, yeah, it's fine.
Yeah.
The Birds is pretty whatever. Marnie is bizarre. Like, the only reason to watch it is for all of the weird, like, bestiality references from Sean Connery. Just because they make no sense, and they're really creepy.
I fucked the dog once.
It's weird. Like there's literally a part where some guy says like there's nothing better for the inside of a man or a woman than the outside of a horse.
The fuck?
Yeah, and there's stuff like that throughout the entire movie. Like weird people say weird shit, and I'm like, is this like a theme or a motif that no one's picking up on? Like, what the hell is this?
Dude, Tippi Hedren's been in a lot of weird animal-related movies, or like animal-referencing movies, like Birds.
That's true.
Marnie, and then that
what
one
was the
movie.
lion one?
Yeah, I'm like, what is going on, Tippi Hedren? Like, what is your deal?
So North by Northwest is like pretty good. It's got some annoying stuff. Vertigo
like
is
Cary
pretty.
Grant.
I mean, the main thing with that, like, I always hate the ending of that movie, where he's
too.
like pulling the lady onto the bed from the freaking Mount Rushmore or whatever.
Darling, you almost fell. Like,
I
God
know.
damn it, Alfred Hitchcock and your shitty ass endings.
Vertigo is like all right. I don't like Jimmy Stewart
In that movie or in general?
in general, but he's especially annoying in that movie.
I tend to like him. We're talking about Vertigo with like another really bad ending.
Yeah, another terrible ending.
I feel like that's Alfred Hitchcock is the Stephen King of movie making. I've never seen one ending of his where I'm like, that was good. Like they've all been kind of like crappy.
Strangers on a Train is a good ending.
It does. It doesn't have one of those weird like. Well, I mean, it's also just a goofy like the climax of the movie is just goofy. Like, they're on a merry-go-round going like 700 miles an hour.
I know. They're being like flung through the air on the merry-go-round from hell.
Dude, that movie's so good.
Yeah.
Like with
Rebecca has a really bad ending. Rebecca has Laurence Olivier in it too, which is like, what are you doing in a Hitchcock movie? What else? Shadow of a Doubt has like a pretty good ending, but it's one of those things where it's like everything in the movie is great until the ending, and then the ending's just kind of like, eh.
Yeah, okay. I will say Rear Window has I will call it a goofy ending because like it's just a perfect. It actually does have like the perfect way to end the movie with like you've seen Rear Window, yeah, you already said that.
Yeah.
With like Jimmy Stewart falling and like everyone like coming to his help, and then the end of the movie is like him in two casts, and Grace Kelly just like reading the Outdoor magazine. Just kidding, no, she's not. It's like all right.
Yeah, I think it's like that goofy ending is you don't see that much in movies anymore because it's almost too goofy.
Yeah, well,
except for Birds of Prey.
Well, but also most movies like they stretch out the denouement part of it, whereas like Hitchcock is just like action, okay, and we're done. Like that's how I feel, and a lot of older movies as well feel that way, where it's just like they don't let the ending breathe, which is it's kind of sad to see that kind of ending go, But like, hey, we'll always have 40 years of that kind of ending if I ever really miss it.
I know.
So
40 years. Well, we'll always have Paris.
We'll always have the golden age of Hollywood.
We'll
Here's
always
looking
have
at
40
you,
years
kid.
of. We'll always have 40 years of abrupt, poorly timed endings. Here's looking at you, movies.
Just like Alfred Hitchcock with his slate, like, here's looking at you, movies. But yeah, like.
I like how when Alfred Hitchcock later in life, he was like even more morbidly obese than he was earlier in life. And when he would give interviews and stuff, like whenever he would bob his head up and down, like his neck would like inflate like a frog. It's always such like a crazy visual.
You like kind of looked like Winston Churchill. Yeah, I would say that, like, to me, I feel like Billy Wilder's probably a better and more consistent director than Alfred Hitchcock. So.
Yeah, I would, based on just The Apartment, I would second that.
Well, I'm glad we put that debate to bed. Well, it's funny because you like on those Turner Classic Movie thing. Not to like belabor this point too much, but like on the Turner Classic Movie things and like the favorite, like who's your favorite director? I feel like very rarely you hear people say Billy Wilder. Like I feel like he's kind of forgotten in the circles, especially of like younger filmmakers. Like, I don't know how many would say like, oh yeah, the guy who made Some Like It Hot, I put him on my top 10 list. And it's like, well, just look at his body of work, and it's amazing that like he made so many. Like it's amazing he made so many films and he made so many good ones. Mm-hmm. Anything else to add on that, or is that a good ending point?
I was trying to find like examples of filmmakers who said that Billy Wilder was a huge influence, and it says the guy
Myers?
who made the guy who made The Artist thanked Billy Wilder in his Academy Awards speech. And then I started laughing because no one can ever pronounce the dude's name. It's like Michel Hajavanishevich. Can you imagine like John Travolta reading his name? It's like, and the winner for Best Director goes to Adele Dazeem for The Artist.
God, I really don't like The Artist.
I know a lot of people don't like The Artist.
Hey, man, after The Apartment, it's one of the only two other movies that won Best Picture for Best Black and White Picture. Ugh, as they say in Breathless, makes me want to puke. Well, if you ever want to follow us, what is our website? underthewheels.wixsite.com/blog. You can also like us on Facebook, which has links to the website in case you don't want to bother with the URL. It also has links to the podcast episodes. Our podcast is available on Apple Podcasts and Stitcher. Special thanks to Mike Foster for our awesome theme music. Yes. And you can always email us at underthewheelsblog@gmail.com.
Under the Wheels podcast.
Are you there? Oh, did I lose you?
Huh?
Yes, that would be it. Yeah, Under the Wheels podcast @gmail.com. This is why you do the plugs. But I always look for that one too. I will say, I'm like, is he gonna say the email address? Is it coming? Yeah, as you said, special thanks to Mike F for the music. He's keeping us rocking.
Special thanks to Michelle for having the worst name ever.
Oh my god. I think on that note, my name is Matthew.
I'm Gabe.
And we've just been under the wheels with Michelle Hazanavicius. Yalla Rufus. We should. I liked that. We should watch more classic movies.
Yeah. Considering that the entire world has come to a screeching halt, like,
I know.
By the time we do another one, do you think there will be any like new movies we can see, or will we have to just dig back in? Just like, okay, what's on streaming right now?
I think right now we are going to have to delve in. Like, I think for the next month and a half, it's going to be trudging up like Peter Jackson's Bad Taste, which is on YouTube.
Really?
Yeah, so we can watch a shitty version on YouTube, or we can watch the version on Amazon Prime. So yeah, because I think they said that they would potentially release Black Widow and Mulan on Disney Plus for people to watch, or release it online for people to watch early. But that just sounds like a horrible idea.
I'm kind of hoping Mulan is a bomb. I don't want that movie to succeed.
I know that the initial reaction was really good. Like, a lot of people were like, I'm not allowed to print my review. I think I told you about this, and like, I like to make fun of I'm not able to print my review, but this is like the female-led action movie we all deserved with war scene. And I was like, I guess, but there are a lot of people who are also praising other movies on Twitter that, like, after it comes out, turns out to just be like, it was fine.
Yeah,
so,
well, it's a Disney movie. They pay all the reviewers to say good things.
Well, I mean, they pay all the reviewers who see it early to tweet good things, which is, that's the difference. It's like, oh, did you read my tweet on this? It tells you everything you need to know about the movie. You go in and read the review, and it's like, this is a steaming pile of shit. Why didn't they get people who could actually speak English? Like, why did they do an awkward dubbing of the main actress's voice so she didn't sound... Anyway. I don't think that happened, but, like...
Finished.